All right, so this webinar won't take too long. I don't think it'll take the full hour. But basically, I just want to make sure that you're prepared for orientation, and there's a few like program logistics that I thought would be easier to just kind of get out of the way, since we do have, there's some lag time. You started on Monday, and you don't see me until next week, to make sure that you're not confused about anything going into the program. Zach, did you join us?
Yeah, I did.
Great, welcome. Nice to see you. Hear you.
A little bit of chaos going on, but I'm here now.
All right, excellent. So Zach and Faith are the only two on the call, and I'm worried that, like, in all of the midst of the bazillion emails that have gone out from CNCS and me and Ryan, that everyone else just lost it got lost in the mix. So I'm recording.
Okay.
We'll send it to them. So we're just going to go over a few things today and make sure that you're settled and ready for orientation next week. So we'll talk about overview of the program, there's just some program logistics, orientation logistics. I want to make sure that you're set to go on Timesheets, and then talk about your AmeriCorps.gov account real quick. So first off, what is the Rural Opportunity VISTA program? Like I just mentioned, many moving pieces, and at orientation, you will receive an in-depth training about AmeriCorps and the different types of AmeriCorps service. We'll go into an introduction of CEDM and the community economic development field and how all of these pieces fit together. But just as like a brief overview so you have an understanding. I think there's some noise that's coming through phone in the background. Would you mind putting it on mute?
Oh, yes.
And then, Zach, I don't hear anything on your end. It tells me who's like on the screen. It tells me who's
I can hear them, but I was hoping that it wasn't coming through on your end. So.
Okay. Well, if both of you want to push mute, that's. And then, of course, please feel free to ask questions.
Real quick, how do I mute it? Sorry.
Oh, goodness. Let's see.
I think I figured it out.
Okay. I think it's like *6.
Yeah.
Yeah, *6 is mute, and *7 is unmute.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Okay, so AmeriCorps is a federal program, and in order to host an AmeriCorps program, organizations apply to the Corporation for National and Community Service and say there's a need, and the way that we plan to solve that need is through AmeriCorps. So the organization that hosts the Rural Opportunity VISTA program is CEDM, and so we're a statewide kind of like a trade organization for community economic development in Michigan. So we have around 250 member organizations, and our goal is to provide support and assistance to them. And what we've really saw is that there's a need in rural communities for capacity building. There's just not as many people, and I'm sure, as you're aware, it's just hard to get people to move back there when people move out. And so we saw that within our rural organizations and our rural communities that there was a big need, a lot of organizations that have just a few staff people who are trying to do big things and make big changes in their community. So we applied to host this Rural Opportunity VISTA program to meet that need, and we were awarded it. So CEDM is, like, I'm the program director for the VISTA program, but then you have a site supervisor at your organization who is your day-to-day contact. So if you have questions about AmeriCorps specifically or CEDM, that's where you want to come to me. And then if you have questions about your day-to-day activities, that's where you go to your supervisor. You all have a VAD, a VISTA assignment description, that will help guide your day-to-day work, but if there's ever a need to change the VAD, that's when you come to me. So those have all been approved by me and your supervisor. We've worked on it together. So that's kind of just a brief overview of kind of how that looks on our side and kind of like the hierarchy, But then also I do want to make sure that you're aware that we have another AmeriCorps program too. So a lot of the times when I'm addressing you as a group, I'll just call you CETM's AmeriCorps because we have an AmeriCorps state program as well. So that's the Michigan Financial Opportunity Corps program. And there's 20 members in that program, and they're doing direct services in their community where they're facilitating financial education classes. They're hosting community resource fairs, and their goal is to provide direct service to their community to build financial stability. So where you as a VISTA member are doing behind-the-scenes work, building capacity, creating sustainability, creating programming, the AmeriCorps state members in the Michigan Financial Opportunity Corps program are doing that hands-on direct service. So regardless of which program, we at CETM kind of treat you the same. We bring you all together. There are some benefits and requirements that are different that we'll learn about at orientation. But just know that at orientation, it's going to be just the VISTA members. But then for the rest of the trainings throughout the year, it will be everybody, all of CETM's AmeriCorps. So there's about 30 of you serving across the state, and you'll get to meet all of them in November at our first quarterly training. So the overarching goals in our programs are, of course, first giving back to the community and serving your community, building sustainability, and building capacity within your organizations. But our program also really focuses on gaining professional development skills. So we're being really purposeful about this with the upcoming year. You guys are kind of like our guinea pigs. But we're doing some very purposeful professional development around soft skills and around community economic development as a field. So when talking to host sites and organizations, I did a survey earlier this year, earlier in 2018, and was asking, what are the things that people who are coming into this field, the skills or the knowledge that they don't have, and how can we help make sure that people who are coming into the field, who are coming into our AmeriCorps program, are successful. There's just a general lack of knowledge around community economic development. And it's kind of like a nebulous term where it encompasses so many things, and that's why at orientation we'll spend an hour going over what community economic development is. But it's basically, anything that's done in your community to improve it, and then empower people to improve themselves. The typical community development people think of is like building affordable housing, but we look at it really all-encompassing as, even like arts programs are community economic development. Financial education is community economic development. Environmental stewardship is community economic development. Because all those things come together to make a community a place that people want to live. So we'll be doing community economic development 101 webinars throughout your entire term, where you'll be learning more in depth about different sectors of this field. So that's half of our professional development piece, and the other half is a soft skills training. So that was the other piece that people came back to us and said that they're getting some really educated people applying to their positions, but sometimes they don't have the skills in communication or time management, and that can be difficult to teach. And so I've done some brainstorming, and I'm going to try to have you all teach each other those soft skills this year to try to just give each other tips and tricks on, oh, hey, I'm really good at time management. Here's how I do that. So having you train each other and give you sharing resources within each other. So that hopefully at the end of your AmeriCorps term, you're really coming out of this as a well-rounded community economic development professional who have absolutely no trouble finding a job in whichever sector of the field or outside of the community economic development field once you're finished. So that's an overview of that. Well, I'll go into more in depth into what that means at orientation, but I just did want to give you kind of a heads up. And then also, who's who at CEDM? So I know it was probably confusing for you with Ryan doing your phone interviews, and then you're like, who's this Rachel person? So Ryan was a VISTA leader, and what that means is that's a second or third or fourth year VISTA member who does more of the program administration type of work. And so their term finished about 2 weeks ago, and we're not bringing on another VISTA leader. So just heads up, I'm going to be your contact. It's not because Ryan wasn't excellent. It was actually because Ryan was so excellent that they kind of worked themselves out of a job. They created a lot of these presentations and sustainability pieces and did such a good job that I think that if we brought on another VISTA leader to serve for a year, that person might be bored because they wouldn't have enough to do. So it's just going to be me who is your main contact for questions, concerns, all of that during your AmeriCorps term here at CEDM. And then we also have Chris, who will be doing some of the admin pieces. Chris is CEDM's administrative assistant, and you will meet him at orientation. He will be collecting your timesheets and also your monthly reports. So, and then like throughout the year, whenever there's like an administrative like paperwork and stuff that needs to be collected, that stuff you'll be sending to Chris. So just to take a little bit off my plate, but he'll be collecting that kind of stuff for you. But I did want to give you a little bit of background about who I am. This is feedback that I got doing my site visits this year, is that, I've got a lot going on and that sometimes people don't know why I am in the role that I am. So I've decided to kick it off this year by letting you know who I am. And that picture on the webinar is me from when I served as a VISTA member. So I started off right out of college. I graduated in 2008 from Michigan State University with an urban planning degree, and that was right at the beginning of the recession, and it was really difficult to find a job. And I also didn't really know what I wanted to do, so that didn't help. So my friend gave me a book, and I think it was called like Finding the Open Road or something like that. And in the very beginning of the book, it said that you should be doing something that you would do for free. And I thought, what do I do for free? Well, I volunteer right now. I volunteer for free, so maybe I can find a job that's somewhere along those lines. So I had heard of AmeriCorps, had looked into Teach for America, but decided I didn't really want to work with youth, and thought, well, what if there's a role out there that is something around volunteering that I can do? So I found this AmeriCorps position at Habitat for Humanity in Columbus, Ohio, and it was volunteer management for Habitat for Humanity. So I ended up moving to Ohio and spent a year as a VISTA member doing volunteer management and volunteer recruitment. So if that's a piece of your VAD, then I am happy to help if you have questions, concerns, because even though I had been volunteering when I started as an AmeriCorps VISTA member, I didn't have a lot of skills in volunteer recruitment, and I had to learn a lot during my time, so I have a lot of resources and like tips and tricks of where you can find information. So I started as an AmeriCorps member. I've been in your shoes, and I loved it so much that I wanted to do a second term. I had a really excellent VISTA leader while I was serving who provided a lot of great support to me. And I saw how he was able to provide support to the VISTA members and decided to apply to be a VISTA leader. So I did serve for a second term as well as a VISTA leader. And that time I was with the Ohio Association of Food Banks, so still in Columbus, Ohio. I served for a year, and my role, they actually decided to give me all the tricky host sites and difficult members. That was my expertise. So apparently I've been good at managing AmeriCorps members and helping people work through struggles and difficulties in their service terms ever since the beginning. And I served as a VISTA leader for a statewide program there for 1 year. When that term was up, my program coordinator, my supervisor, was actually leaving to take another job in New York City, and I applied for the position and received that position. So I've been in AmeriCorps since 2008 in one way or another, and then have been here in Michigan with CEDM since 2012. So all that to say that please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I didn't go into the nitty-gritty of my service terms, but there were definitely pieces of the puzzle that weren't great, and I think that experiencing that allowed me to grow and become the professional that I am, and it allows me to understand where you're coming from when you have struggles as well. AmeriCorps is not easy, and I want to make sure that you know that I know that, because serving at a low income voluntarily in an organization that obviously they requested you because they need help. There are a variety of different moving pieces that can make an AmeriCorps term really challenging. But as you probably can guess, I also found my terms to be very rewarding. As I'm here today, still 10 years later, working with AmeriCorps. I really love AmeriCorps. I really believe in AmeriCorps. I think that everybody can have a positive term, even if there are struggles and hiccups along the way. And even if it is a struggle, it's a great learning experience, and you will always have great answers to interview questions in the future if you have to overcome those hurdles. So just don't hesitate to come to me, reach out to me. I'd rather know if you're having troubles before it becomes something where you're just like, I'm fed up and I'm leaving. Not to scare you, because again, AmeriCorps is excellent, and specifically our program, I'm really excited about this professional development that we're doing this term, and I hope that you find value in it as well. So that is who's who at CEDM, and just kind of like an overview. The rest of this won't take as long. Do you have any questions at this point? All right, excellent. So let's move on to orientation logistics. So I already sent an email that had an attachment with the agenda for orientation. And, oh shoot, I forgot to tell you one thing. When I'm going to send out a link to this presentation so you're able to watch it again if you want when I get off the phone. And I'm also going to send you a link to something that I'm calling the Member Resources folder. So that is a Dropbox link. And if you aren't familiar with Dropbox, it's basically a file sharing tool. I'll send you a link to this folder and save that link, because copies of everything from your entire service term will go in there. And in there is a copy of the orientation agenda as well. And I'm actually going to share my screen with you really quickly so you can see what this Dropbox folder looks like. This is going to be key to being successful during your term. So you should be able to see my screen now. And this is what it's going to look like when you go to the Dropbox folder. So can you see my screen?
Yep.
If you can't, let me know. Okay, cool. I will assume that you can. All right, so this is what the Dropbox folder looks like. And there are a few pieces here. One is AmeriCorps program announcements. So copies of important emails are going to go in here. So if I send out an email saying, register for this training, here is this information. That's going to go in this program announcements folder too. So you're always going to have access to that. Hopefully that'll make it a little bit easier for people to find what they need during their terms. The next tab is the resource guides. This is important. This is something that Ryan put together before their VISTA leader term was over. And it has just tips and tricks on how to serve as an AmeriCorps member. So, for example, the AmeriCorps portal guide has instructions on how to utilize your My.AmeriCorps.gov page, CEDM expense reports, instructions on how to fill out expense reports for CEDM, CEDM training guides, some information about our trainings here at CEDM. So this can be really helpful. I would suggest just going into it. Email etiquette, if you have questions about what's expected of you in terms of that kind of professionalism. Same thing with phone etiquette, program communications. All of this stuff is in here, and it can be really helpful for you. So that's the CEDM resource guides. And as the year goes, if there's things that I find myself continually having to train people on, I'll keep adding more resource guides in here, so that information is there at your fingertips at all times. Then there's also MFOC, so the Michigan Financial Opportunity Court folder, and then a VISTA folder. So for you, your VISTA member, in here you'll see there's a copy of the orientation agenda and then a copy of the timesheet. So we're going to go over the timesheet today on this webinar, but then you can also go in here and check out the orientation agenda at any time and see where you're expected to be and when. All right, so let's go back. Stop sharing my screen. Okay, so orientation logistics. Again, the agenda's in there, but I just wanted to give you a heads up of what to expect. So on Tuesday, we'll be doing training from 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. That is at the Foster Community Center, which you should already have that information, but if you don't, it is on the agenda. That's in that member resources folder. And then from 6 to 8, we are going bowling for fun. So it is required fun. So just heads up that you are expected to be there, and I'll give you directions and whatnot, but I'll also feed you dinner at bowling. And then there's just some information about the different trainings that we'll be having in that day. And then Wednesday, I have you from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., and then at 4 p.m. you're free to go home. And Wednesday will be a lot more of like the reflection kind of soft skills type stuff. So again, the agenda can be found in the member resources folder. The hotel location is on there. The location of the actual training is on there as well. Dress is business casual, so just know that you don't have to dress in a suit or anything like that. In fact, you probably rarely will have to do that, if at all, as an AmeriCorps member. But, you know, wear nice jeans, slacks, a skirt, something like that, nice shirt, just nothing with holes in it. It doesn't have to be anything too nice. But just know that I'm going to be taking pictures during orientation, so keep that in mind. And you'll be receiving an AmeriCorps t-shirt at orientation, and I'm going to ask you to wear it. At least put it on during the picture. I'm going to take a group picture on Wednesday, so just make sure that you're aware of that. And then heads up on travel reimbursement. Your host site will be reimbursing you. So talk to your supervisor if you haven't already about what the reimbursement process is. So they will likely reimburse you for mileage and then any meals that I'm not providing. But that is something you'll want to talk to them about, and you'll just follow whatever policies your organization also follows. And then last but not least, I'm asking you to come to orientation with a copy of this form called Getting to Know Your Host Site. So that is also in your member resources folder. It's a 2-page document where it asks you to ask questions of your supervisor. So things like, what is the travel reimbursement policy? What hours am I expected to be here? What is the policy on creating flyers at the organization? What are the holidays? How do I request sick time? Questions like that are kind of, it might sound simple and obvious that, of course, I would already know this information, but maybe you haven't been told this yet. If you can fill it out on your own and you already know the information, you've already been told, then you don't have to ask your supervisor. But I am asking that everybody comes to orientation having had that conversation at some point with their supervisor with that form filled out, so that we can talk about it when we have our professionalism training. And you'll find it's probably a good example of how different organizations view policies differently across the state. So do you have any questions about orientation? All right. Cool. Moving right on to timesheets. So we're almost finished here. Next thing I want to talk about is timesheets. Again, there's a copy of this in your member resources folder, but I'm going to share my screen with you again so that we can look at this together. But before that, so AmeriCorps VISTA members are required to serve full time, and so that means at least 75 hours on each timesheet. What that looks like, timesheets are two weeks. So about 37.5 hours a week is what you need to be serving, and you are required to serve whatever hours is full-time for your organization. So if everybody at your organization works 40 hours a week, that's what you should be expected to serve, and you should be expected to be there at the standard work hours. So if everybody at your organization is there from 8:30 to 5, that's when you're there. If they're all there from 8 to 4 or 9 to 5:30, you're expected to kind of be like one of the team when it comes to the hours that you're in the office. Where that can change a little bit is around personal time and sick time. So you've probably already had this drilled into you by VISTA and CNCS. So you have 10 days of personal time and 10 days of sick time as a VISTA member. So that's 80 hours of each as a VISTA member with our program. So when it comes to requesting that time off, that's another way that you will follow the policy of your organization. So if there's a form that everybody fills out to request time off, you'll fill that form out too. If your supervisor says, okay, everyone needs to text me if they're sick, then you'll text your supervisor too. If she wants a phone call, you'll call them. So follow the policy at your organization there, but you will have probably a different amount of time off than other people. So you have 10 days of personal, 10 days of sick. That's a VISTA regulation. So it can get a little confusing where there are VISTA regulations and host site and when do you follow which, but feel free to reach out if you ever have questions. So for our program, you have to use that time in 4-hour increments. That's simply because we're tracking this on spreadsheets, as you'll see. It's not easy to track. So just keep that in mind that, if you're going to take time off, make sure you take 4 hours or 8 hours or 12 hours or 16 hours. So you can't use just 1 hour. Let's see. And then holidays, you will receive the same holidays as your host site. So if they're closed on Labor Day, you aren't expected to be there on Labor Day either. And you'll just put that on your timesheet as holiday time, and I'll show you how that works here in a second. All right, so let's look at a timesheet. And if you have questions at all during this, feel free to jump in because this is somehow, it's usually pretty confusing to people. All right, so I pulled up a copy of the timesheet. Again, you can find that in your Member Resources folder, and this is what it's going to look like. So like I mentioned, your timesheet is for 2 pay periods, and as we're looking at it here, on the left side, there's a column for which day, and then there's time in, time out, length of lunch, and then total time. So if everyone at your organization is required to take a lunch, you are too. If they're not, you don't have to. You can talk to your supervisor about how that works at your organization, because that's another thing that I don't mandate, but it is up to your host site. So say on Monday, you started at 8:30, so you put it in here, type it in, 8:30, and you left at 5, and you took a half an hour lunch. So 0.5 for lunch. Then you have to put in the total number of hours. So 8:30 to 5, but taking out a half an hour of lunch is 8 hours. And then it's going to pre-populate this for you in the spreadsheet. So make sure you're using the electronic version and you're like handwriting this because it won't pre-populate. So then on here, and then you'll go to Tuesday. And Tuesday, so say you were sick. So there's a little drop down. You can take 4, 8. Okay, I took 8 hours of sick time on that day. And again, see it's pre-populating up here where it has personal, sick, holiday, and then other time. So then Wednesday, let's talk about other. So Wednesday, your host site was closed because there was a fire. So that's when you would use other. It's like a really extenuating circumstance, like a fire or snow closure or electric outage. So only those like extenuating circumstances should you ever be putting other. And if you ever put other on there, make sure you put something in the comments and say like snow day, so that when Chris is reviewing your timesheet, he doesn't have to come back to you and ask like what's going on here. But you don't normally have to put comments unless you want to, or unless unless there's a reason where you need to explain what's going on. So basically, you'll just fill this out for every day. I mean, normally it's just going to probably look the same. Like my timesheets pretty much always look like 8:30 to 5. Oh, it said 5 a.m. That's funny. So make sure it says p.m. So just fill it out. It'll mostly look the same. But if there's ever any extenuating circumstances, make sure to put it on here. And it's going to pre-populate. So when you're putting in information on here, like it's adding up your totals for you down at the bottom. And then up at the top, it'll tell you the total number of hours. So during this week, you had 40 hours because 32 of them were regular service hours, and then 8 hours were sick time. And then for the second week, it'll also pre-populate for you on there too. So it's going to look the same. And just make sure that you're using this electronically. And then if you have questions about what constitutes as service time, that kind of thing, feel free to reach out to me. Common questions are like travel time. Travel time does count as service time, so a lot of you are going to be traveling from pretty far away for our training. When you leave the house in the morning, that's when the time starts ticking for you. Or if you're traveling, like Zach, I know you have a hotel room the night before. So the night before, if you're traveling, that time that it takes you to get from your house to the hotel room, that counts as service time as well. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at your timesheets too. And then, yeah, I think that's pretty much about it for timesheets. Does anyone have any questions?
You said timesheet is in the Dropbox, or is it somewhere else?
Yes, it's in the Member Resources folder Dropbox.
Okay.
So there's a blank copy of it, and then the one thing I didn't touch on yet is the approval process. So what you're going to do with it is you're going to send it to your supervisor, and then your supervisor actually is the one who submits it to me. So this is, I know it's a little convoluted of a process, but it's basically the best way we could figure out how to do it, because it's expensive to pay for like a time tracking system. So your supervisor has a Google Drive folder where they will upload the timesheet, and that's them saying they approve it. So when they upload it, that's essentially them saying, yes, this is accurate. So they're the ones who are really responsible for approving your timesheets. I will look at them, Chris will look at them, and if there's anything that looks incorrect, so say you only had 60 hours on your timesheet, then Chris would follow up and say, hey, what happened? You're either going to need to use personal or sick time, or did you forget to fill this out? Did you miss filling out a couple of days or something like that? Any other questions on timesheets? All right, excellent. It's usually pretty self-explanatory until something kind of strange comes up, a weird circumstance. But I guess, again, don't hesitate to ask. So last but not least is your My.AmeriCorps.gov account. So again, there is a tutorial to this in your Member Resources folder. There's one that talks specifically about your AmeriCorps.gov account, because it can be a little tricky to navigate the interface of that when you get into your account. And then there's a separate piece that talks specifically about student loan forbearance. So if you do have student loans, you're planning to put them into forbearance, there's a step-by-step guide in there on how to do it, but it shouldn't be difficult. If you run into trouble, then don't hesitate to reach out. I have had members in the past not reach out to me, and they said, oh, well, they just want to go into forbearance, so I guess I just don't qualify, or something like that. And then I look at the situation and think, oh gosh, this person probably qualified, but they just kind of gave up. So don't do that. You're an AmeriCorps member, you're serving, you receive certain benefits, and you are completely entitled to them, and you deserve them. So let me know if you run into hiccups on that. But if you put your loans into forbearance, basically what's going to happen is the system, you just put in your loan information into your My.AmeriCorps.gov account, and then the two systems talk to each other, and then you'll get an alert saying that it's either approved or denied for your forbearance. Once it's approved for the whole term, and you should be all set, and you shouldn't have to pay anything at all on your student loans. And then at the end of your term, once you're exited out of the system, the option to pay back any interest that's accrued on your loans that were in forbearance will pop up for you on there as well. Also important to know that in your My.AmeriCorps.gov account, there is a service letter. So if you need something like that for access to public benefits, for example, it will populate that for you, a letter stating that you are in service. If you need something specific, that's where you'll want to reach out to me, and I'd be happy to write a more specific letter for you. There's also your pay stubs will be in there, so just know that I know you already went in and put in your account information on there, so that you're all set to get paid, but that's where you'll access your pay stubs. I don't have access to those, and the same thing with your tax forms. So I don't have access to those things. The federal government administers all of that. but you should be able to find it in your My.AmeriCorps.gov account. All right, so that's all the information I planned on going over with you today. Do you have any questions at all?
I don't think so. I think you answered all my questions.
All right. Well, great. I appreciate you both being on the webinar this morning, and I'm really looking forward to meeting you or seeing you in the case of Zach next week at orientation. I think it'll be a really great time for us all to get to know each other, and looking forward to seeing you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Have a good rest of your day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.